Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Wednesday. It is June the 4th. Appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate it if you are a new listener. Thanks so much. Hopefully, we are going to have an uneventful show. It looks like we've got all of the required bandwidth to make things happen. I don't know if my complaining on X the other day and tagging Spectrum on it made a difference, but we're going to get a second line rolling in here anyway. It's not Tuesday. But I do want to talk about Taco Tuesday because leftists decided that they were going to dunk on Donald Trump. There's stories about tariffs, which are not particularly interesting. Essentially, Donald Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. He's going to adjust tariffs as necessary to try to get his desired outcomes. And the goofballs like Eric Swalwell and Jamie Raskin and a couple of others decided to eat some really gross-looking tacos in order to dunk on Donald Trump using an acronym that nobody would associate with tacos, Trump always chickens out. That spells out taco. So they ate some like really disgusting looking Cisco tacos. It's just another reminder that they're not very good at this. They are kind of lost. And America is not that interested in sort of a communist push. I've got a fun story that goes from last year that talks about communism. So all of today's show and the name of today's show comes from a little quip that my wife made. She constantly makes little brilliant insights that I walk away with and I ruminate on for hours, sometimes days. And she said, "You never really see a happy communist, do you?" I want you to think about that. Do any of you know somebody that espouses communistic ideas or very hard left ideas which border up on communism? I'm going to kind of draw a line on why I think they are similar. They don't like it, by the way. But then when you start asking the differences, you go, hey, what's the difference between a communist and what you believe as a progressive leftist? There's a hard difficulty trying to delineate that line. It's just not that easy to find. So we're going to talk about it. Why do they love communism? Communism proposes, and this is something I had to write down because communism proposes to provide a salvific heaven on earth experience. And that's antithetical to people in Western ideologies who believe in Christianity, who even believe in Judaism. If you think that there is a better possibility after you die, if there is an afterlife and that exceeds that of the current life, then you're not going to get it. Communists promise to bring it on earth through man-made goods, and that will always, always underdeliver. And then they end up in violence and anger and disappointment, and it all comes out in sort of this gross frustration of dealing with really nasty and unpleasant people. So there you go. That's where we're going to go. Since we are not communists here, we are in fact capitalists. We will recommend somebody who can keep you away from communist countries who are trying to look into your stuff. If you want to protect yourself from our government or any other government, from big tech, which is sort of communistic in the way that they go after things, corporate America, blah, 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 criminals who don't care, maybe you might want to invest in, buy something with your capital. You could buy something like this, and I waited to throw it in today. This is my silent sleeve. This is my phone, so nobody interrupts the podcast. You guys can check yourself out. Protect yourself with Silent. It's SLNT. That's the word silent with no vowels. Silence Faraday blocking products, or Faraday products which block all incoming and outgoing signals, are a way to make your devices invisible, safe from the outside world, unhackable because they cannot be accessed. You can put it in a backpack, which we have one of. You can put them in the phone sleeves like I have here on the desk. They make pants. They make dry bags. They make non-dry bags. If you're a swimmer, maybe you want the dry bag. It's kind of nice to be able to throw your phone in there, know that it disappears, and nobody knows you're in the water without your gun, unless you swim with a gun. But also keeps it dry after the fact when you put your towels in there. Yeah, I'm speaking from experience here. Their signal blocking technology gives you peace of mind. It stops all the Wi-Fi signals. It stops the RF signals from Bluetooth, from your actual phone, et cetera, et cetera. Makes them unhackable. It makes you kind of disappear off the GPS grid. You place the device inside, you close it up, you're safeguarded. That's it. No unauthorized access. Go silent today at slnt.com/Kyle. You'll save 15% on any order you make. If it's, you're also going to get free shipping. Stay ahead of what's coming at you. Secure your privacy. The only way you do that is by making sure that you control your signal in the world. Again, slnt.com/KYLE. 15% off and free shipping on all your qualified orders. Let's get into today's show. Here we go. So some of you guys are still having issues over on the Rumble stream. I don't know if that's a Rumble issue, but we had plenty of bandwidth to get things going. So maybe it's just you, or maybe it's just Rumble. But if you are having one of those issues, I would invite you to join us over on YouTube. You can do that too. That's why we put it in different places. You can go to Locals, which is KyleSeraphin.com. It's a free stream over there. You can find us at rumble.com/KyleSeraphin. Give us a thumbs up if you're watching over there. If it's working for you, great. And if not, you can go to youtube.com/@KyleSeraphin. Back to streaming in 4K today. Hopefully it's all going through. Like I said, this is kind of an interesting thing. We're going to get another line in here, but you guys are, I see your chat. Here's what it looks like, folks. That's the chat. Intermittent people discussing whether or not we have Rumble issues. So that's kind of fun. All right, we're going to lead off today with this taco thing because I think it's fun. I think it's dumb. That's almost like a half-assed Nazi salute. There was actually an educational video that we showed at one point in time of what is and what is not the Nazi salute. If you guys, I'll have to go to the full screen here. Whether your hand breaks the 90-degree plane, if it goes on a slightly upward angle, it becomes the Nazi salute. If it's below that, you're safe. I guess Eric Swalwell marked safe from Nazi salute. I had to go into a garbage British reprint of a Huffington Post story in order to get this headline. Representative Eric Swalwell inspires MAGA tizzy fit by eating a taco. No, it's just kind of like the left can't meme. They just don't have the ability to be both clever, funny, and make the point at the same time, and it doesn't impact. They also have to be really profane and kind of gross. I'm actually not going to play you the video. We got plenty of communists swearing for later on in the show, but the story goes is that he had a TikTok video, which is obviously staged. It's staged with microphones already on him because that's how it works. That's how you normally sit down and just have your lunch, isn't it? That's how you guys eat your lunch. You just mic up and then hope someone might walk in while filming and having the same mic set. You understand what I'm saying. All these things are contrived. But Yahoo News reported that he trolled the hell out of Donald Trump and supporters by eating a taco on TikTok. The video features somebody walking into the office saying, quote, "Hey, Congressman, what the F is up with Donald Trump always chickening out on tacos?" And he eats a Taco Bell taco. That's the gist of the video. And that was it. And that prompted his buddy, Jamie Raskin, to post this yesterday to remind us that, one, he used to be a gang member or maybe someone who was getting cancer treatment. It's not real clear to say that. And he thought that posting this sort of like Cisco compilation of mediocre meats, kind of sad looking lettuce, and the whitest tacos, these are like the most gringo Cisco tacos from the most generic food truck in the DC area that you could ever find, or I'm sure it came out of the cafeteria there. This was his troll. And I guess they're trying to say like, hey, guys are just like us. They eat tacos and they make fun of people. Is that effective? For a group of people that are having such a struggle right now connecting with men who do nothing but like lampoon each other and make fun of each other left and right, it's really interesting that they thought this was going to be a successful move. It's it's comical in so much as it's sad. It's kind of like people getting really upset about Harvey Milk's name being taken off a Navy ship. And that's the next story I wanted to do too. Look, there's not much to it. Tacos equals, just so you guys know, when you hear it, you go like, why are people talking about tacos with the Democrats? Trump is always chickening out. That's what it means. Believe that if you want. Here you go. In the same way, kind of like picking losers, siding on the 20 side of the 80-20. Are there any people that are really supporting Harvey Milk's name on a naval ship? Pete Hegseth ordered the Navy to strip the name of the gay rights icon. I got into kind of like a weird little rabbit hole today, and it was quite interesting. I was like, hey, people have called Harvey Milk a pedophile. Is that an accurate statement? And when you go look it up on left-leaning sources, they just go, it's a conspiracy theory that gay men are pedophiles. And I went like, well, that checks out. Like, I'm sure that not all gay people are pedophiles. That's a ridiculous position to hold. But some gay people are pedophiles, just like some straight people are pedophiles, because some pedophiles just exist, period. I wasn't curious whether or not Harvey Milk was alleged to be a pedophile because he was gay. I was curious if he was alleged to be a pedophile because there was evidence of him doing things that were pedophilic. And so there's, I guess, this conflicting reports on whether or not he was targeting young men in their teens. And of course, we're far enough away that we don't have digitized copies of the stories at the time, but they did in fact name a couple of like 15-year-old men, young men, at the time who had alleged relationships with him. And so there's at least enough there that I just don't think that the Navy, which already struggles with sort of like the stigma of being the gayest military service. Yeah, I said it out there, Navy folks. You guys know what I'm talking about. What do they say about submariners? 100 men go underway and 50 couples come back up. I've heard that. Yes, I have. I've heard all kinds of funny things. I heard people that it's not gay if you're underway. I've heard that too. Navy guys, I heard that from you. And as somebody who used to be part of the Navy of the Sky, aka the Air Force, you know, I feel like the Army and the Marine Corps get a little bit out of this. They can always claim the men's department, so they're not part of this. But there's an inter-service rivalry. You're just not going to get more recruiting by naming ships after quote-unquote gay rights icons who may or may not have been pedophiles. Like I said, data is still out there. You don't need that. So Pete Hegseth catching flack from that in the military news from military.com. Like the fact that this is like contentious in any way. It's a rare step of renaming a ship. Yeah, no, the rare step was naming a Navy ship, which already struggles with stigma, the USS Harvey Milk. Probably not the way you want to go about it. So the military.com says they reviewed a memorandum from the Office of the Secretary of the Navy, the official who holds the power to name Navy ships, that showed that the Sea Service, I guess that's what they're calling the Navy, the Sea Service, that's also not very good. Guys, seamen, it's just, all right, comes up with a rollout plan for renaming the oiler ship, the USNS Harvey Milk. Yeah. The defense officials confirmed that the Navy was making preparations to strip the ship of its name. They were ordered to do so by Pete Hegseth. I mean, I think that's what we voted for, right? I think most of America was like, yeah, that's not the way that you go and recruit men. You want to restore the luster to some institutions. Maybe you start doing things like encourage masculinity, because in theory, when you go and you raise your hand and swear in, when you go and do that enlisted oath, which I did, you're supposed to be pledging your life. That's a masculine thing to do. And I don't care if you have daughters that are in the service. It's a masculine thing to do to say that you're going to go die for something like that. And the vast majority of the military, especially all the combat jobs, tend to be men. And I think that's where it should be. That's the right people to do it. You don't get them to sign up with the Harvey Milk. You also aren't probably going to get them to sign up to fight on behalf of Ukraine. But that doesn't seem to stop some of our people who may or may not be fans of Harvey Milk, like Lindsey Graham, from going over to Ukraine and offering all this help. And then suddenly we find ourselves maybe not even anymore in a proxy war with Russia, but potentially in a legitimately sort of semi-undeclared war. I heard this from Rebecca Koffler the other day. She showed up on War Room with Bannon, and she's talking about the actions that just happened. There was a demolition that happened at the bridge that goes to Crimea, and all of this is sort of like not interesting to me right up until the point where we find out that we have U.S. senators spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on short trips to go over. And then immediately thereafter, we have what seems to be more sophisticated military operations than Ukrainian military forces are able to actually pull off without the help of, let's say, I don't know, our friends at the CIA. So this is Rebecca Koffler making the declaration or making the claim that by the United States sending people over and by the actions that were recently taken, the U.S. is basically, they've lifted the veil and said, we know and you know, because the Russians know what the Ukrainian military can and can't do, that we're basically declaring war on Russia. That's not a good thing. I guess it's good that we have better recruiting right now, but I don't want to see any of our sons and daughters in there, whether they're serving on the Harvey Milk or anything else. So here's Rebecca Koffler kind of making the analysis, let's say, on the current status after that demolition of the bridge.
Yes, sir. We are no longer in a proxy war with Russia. The United States is now officially in a direct kinetic war with Moscow because of how Russia looks at things. Ukraine has no indigenous capability to execute this tactically brilliant operation that doesn't have satellites. It cannot geolocate these strategic nuclear bombers, right? That those bombers are reserved to wage nuclear war, and Ukraine just attacked them. And that came right after Ukraine tried to assassinate President Putin. Russian President Putin's helicopter, when he was visiting Ukraine, came under a drone attack. And so right now, because the nuclear doctrine of the Russian Federation that Putin actually updated late last year, because he has noticed that we are consistently climbing this escalation ladder, it has a clause of a joint attack. And so they are looking at this attack that it is enabled by the United States. And that is the danger. We are climbing very steadily the escalation ladder, and we're probably, the actual full ladder is classified, so I can't talk about it, but it's my official intelligence assessment that we have climbed up more than 50% at this point. And the danger is here. At first, it goes pretty gradually, but then after you cross a certain threshold, it goes very, very fast into cyber warfare, space warfare, and then all the way into the nuclear. And every single war game that we conducted back in the intelligence community, and we conducted dozens of them, and I led some of the red teams, it ended up in a nuclear war. And guess what? Blue lost and red won. Why? Because Putin has a playbook. He has been planning for it. It's all, very well thought through. And we don't. We don't have the response, because instead of actually targeting Russia and neutralizing the threat, the deep state of the U.S. intelligence community was chasing the non-existent Russia-Trump collusion. So they weren't doing their job. They were.
Okay, so I wanted to break away from that. But first of all, she did write a book called Putin's Playbook, so she obviously has kind of a vested interest in there. She did mention a couple things in there that I thought were truly telling. One, that the United States intelligence community and the apparatus that exists in there, the sort of like deep state that we hear about, people that think that they know what's best and should execute U.S. foreign policy, even though they weren't elected, because they outlast presidents. That attitude that I've been here longer and I will be here longer and I'm going to be able to make the continuity of government work. It's a very entitled position. And it turns out kind of dangerously so. I listened to Jesse Kelly's piece the other day saying that 92% of government employees vote Democrat. And it doesn't make every one of them a communist, but a lot of them lean far more on the progressive side. And if nothing else, they're voting for people who are mouthing platitudes towards the communists and the sort of progressive left. Progressive just means it's always going forward. There's no real principle. They just have to make movements, right? And they're always looking to make the world better through government. I don't know when that's ever been the case. There's no great examples of the world made better through government. The more government you have, eventually you get less good. You might apex where you have like an okay mixture of not very much government and as much freedom as you can get. And then the minute you cross over that, then it begins to get worse and worse. And then they just pursue worse by going downhill, getting worse and worse outcomes. Kind of amazing. Her statement is that the red cell, if you guys are not familiar with the way they do this, they whenever you want to sort of make your plans stronger and ironclad, you set up whatever your plans are and you war game them by playing against a red cell. The red cell is people that know what your capabilities are, know what the other's enemies are, and play from the enemy's side. It's essentially playing a game of chess against yourself. And it's not good because the Russians do, for all their weaknesses, and I don't think they're anywhere near the capabilities of the American military, the Russians have continuity. They've had the same guy in office for years. They don't have to worry about internal pushbacks or disagreements or whether or not their commanders are going to kind of buck the system because they just kill those guys. I heard George Hill and I had this little conversation. He called me up specifically to tell me yesterday. He wanted to go on the record. He tweeted out yesterday so I can talk about it. He said that if I was in the position of Vladimir Putin, I being George Hill, if he were in that position, what he would do is what he called a decapitation strike. So you heard it here, probably not first, but you heard it here. A decapitation strike is far superior to going into a nuclear war where the United States and Russia are trading nukes. But the idea that we were able to help and probably most likely without a whole lot of discussion, there's a real probability that you've got people in the intel community that are feeding intelligence to their Ukrainian counterparts, allowing them to make those strategic strikes overseas. helping them take out bridges and things like this, like enabling attacks that are outside of their capabilities. When you do that, you guys have heard this before, that the FBI, that the CIA, they don't want to reveal what they call sources and methods. Oftentimes, you don't get information about what people have said. Like, the actual information itself is not the message. It's that the information could only be derived in a certain way. And so by giving up some information, like, we know that you said the following things. Well, it's like there were 3 people in the room, and one of those people would have had to either been wearing a wire or the room was mic'd up. So if I said something and there were 2 other human beings that I could identify with my eyes, either 1 or 2 of them lied and was leaking information, or the room was compromised. Those are the only kind of options out there. So by you telling me that you knew what I said in that room with 2 other people, you've now revealed the possibility of me uncovering sources or methods. Sources would be the 2 people. Methods would be like a wiretap in the room. Does that make sense? We're talking about when you lift the veil and you use certain intelligence, or you show a capability that you previously didn't have, you've revealed that source and method. And if you know, because you've compromised Ukraine for so long, and they've done it for a long, long time as a neighbor, it means that somebody came in and offered outside assistance. So that's not a great situation. A decapitation strike actually was something that was talked about very, very early on in the Ukraine conflict. Am I the only one that remembers right when it kicked off? Which, by the way, was right when Joe Biden came into office. So, of course, it's not his fault. It couldn't be his fault that we had a feeble world leader out there allowing weakness to kind of show on the world stage and strength to prevail. But there were all these talks about how Vladimir Zelensky was a hero and he was leading his people, and that's why he had to dress in a military uniform, because he was a wartime leader. And the Russian death squads were chasing him down in Kyiv. Do you remember that? And he was on the run. At any moment, he might be killed, but he was also doing media broadcasts, but he was on the run, kind of James O'Keefe style. I'm going dark, pray for me, but also I'm going to be DJing a party in Miami, and I have, like, you know, retards wearing balaclavas on their face and dressing up like they're Cobra commanders. That same sort of theatrical vibe was early on. We may have actually reached the point where that goes down. I think George is probably correct. So it made me start thinking about sort of the remnants of communism and what it used to be like and all of these things. It also made me think about, what was the United States focusing on? What were we focusing on? On the foreign side, were they paying attention to, like, threats to the United States, or were they interested in meddling like they always do, the sort of our intel community, trying to go out there and make things happen that they wanted? Were they focusing on the threat of China, which continues to come in here and do things like flying drones and having students and collecting on us and turning down prosecutions, like whistleblowers told me that we had prosecutions we could go on? The DOJ just filed some charges, and it sounds like the FBI was able to intercept a couple of Chinese nationals coming in with some sort of fungus, which could be considered like an agro-biological threat to our ag industry. We don't really know the details on it yet. I just call it kind of like the cursory glance on it. How much of that was being deprioritized in order to prioritize, like, January 6ers? I got a text message today from Steve Friend with a picture of one of the cases out of Texas, a J6 case, and it categorized it as Tier 1, which was not a thing, by the way, in the FBI. Tier 1 sounds like internal. It sounds like internal. What would you even call that? Like striations, I guess, of who needed to be prioritized in the January 6 investigations themselves. It was added to the title of the investigation, and that's not common nomenclature, certainly not up until like 2022. So at some point in time, and since I never got a J6 case, I can't say what the guidance looked like that. But my guess is that they started tiering out whether Tier 1 meant the highest priority threat or the lowest priority threat. It sounds like the people that were running those cases started tiering those people. Thousands of Americans were the priority. And so the opportunity cost inevitably had to be something else. The media was doing the same thing. The media was prioritizing their own versions of the threats. And when in doubt, just like Taco Tuesday, just like Trump always chickens out, that's where they want to turn the focus, they'll do the same thing about what happened in Boulder. So I've gone from this foreign threat, and I'm looking domestically. It's like, well, we have a bunch of people in here. Can we just admit now that our security apparatus, this deep state that, you know, somebody in the government made a movie about, seems like Deputy Dan made this movie that I was participated in. I actually got paid to be part of it, called Police State, where they were talking about weaponized government, where government predetermined what the outcomes were, and they were not focusing on real threats. They were focusing on the threats that they wanted. It's kind of the same thing our media's been doing here. This is a CNN discussion. They want to go from the terror attack, which, by the way, the FBI didn't interrupt. And I've got a story coming up in a second talking about how they did know that this guy existed. He got turned down for a handgun purchase while he was an illegal alien, a visa overstay. So he should have been on somebody's radar. If you have an illegal alien turned down for being a non-citizen trying to buy a gun in this country, it's the first time that you realize, like, okay, let's say you blew every other indicator. When someone pops up on the radar at NCIS, or what is it, NCIC, and they try to run a NICS background check and they get denied, it could be denied for a felony. So now we know a felon is trying to purchase a gun. So we might want to look into that person. That does seem like a triggering event. It would be a felony for them to hold on to it. What about the illegal alien that's not allowed to be in this country to begin with, and then also chooses to go out and accomplish or purchase firearms? Do you want to go like, well, why does that guy need a firearm? Is he doing dangerous things? Does he just want to exercise the First Amendment or the Second Amendment liberty that he doesn't have access to? What makes this guy want to go get a gun? And why is he so dumb as to buy it in a gun store, of all places, where they're going to run a background check? In any case, that was overlooked. I made the argument the other day that the only terrorists that we catch in the United States are the ones that the federal government is involved in prodding into terrorism. The reason why is because you can't know what's in a man's heart. You can't know what they're going to do before they do it. So we should just accept that that's true. What you can know, though, in advance, is that if you're on the political left and you have to pick a scapegoat, which, by the way, is a very communistic idea, if we could just blame one group of people, if we could just blame one individual, this is the root of all your problems. It's a real leftist thing to do. I don't know why people always assume that's the hard right. But you notice that Hitler did that with the Jews, scapegoated, said these are the problems in the fatherland, right? Stalin did the same thing. Lenin did it. They identified people, farmers and people who had some kind of wealth or land or whatever, that were actually keeping people fed. And they said, oh, these are my problems. If we just got rid of those people, they are the root of the issue. And if you're in the leftist media, that person is Donald Trump. So if you could just get rid of Donald Trump, who obviously is stirring up all this anti-Semitism, you'll notice that the guy came into this country before Donald Trump, came in under policies that were not Donald Trump's, is being deported, his family being deported under policies that were set up by Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who moved the embassy of the United States to get it into Jerusalem. He's obviously anti-Semitic, even though he has, like, Jewish people in his family, and has been, I think by the admission of many people, like one of the more pro-Israel, pro-Jewish presidents. Whether you like that or not is irrelevant. It's very upsetting to people that are on CNN. They want to let you know that it's probably Donald Trump's fault that there's anti-Semitism in the United States. It's not Ilhan Omar. It's not Jasmine Crockett. It's not the Squad. It's not AOC fomenting this nonsense, right? It's Donald Trump, obviously, because Taco Tuesday.
The rise of anti-Semitism in the last decade can be correlated with the rise of Donald Trump. And the kind of language that he gives a permission slip for all of this anti-Semitic language to be used, in a way that we really hadn't seen before.
Is that even, like, does anyone fact check these people? Do they ever, like, listen to themselves before they gather? I think not. I'm going to show you some other clips that are kind of fun. Like I said, communists are always kind of a good trip. I got one more clip, and then we're going to go to a sponsor real quick. Actually, let me do that first. Let me go to a read from one of our sponsors. In this case, we're going to do a Patriot Protect. If you guys want to kind of keep your data away from other communists, particularly the Chinese communists, then you might want to check out my friends over at Patriot Protect. It's patriot-protect.com/Kyle. Again, that promo code Kyle will save you on an annual subscription. The Chinese, another great communist country who doesn't have to worry about dissent, who's able to do unilateral law and rule. They've been using AI technologies to scrape up all of your data. They can use it to impersonate you. They can sell it off to cyber scammers. They can cause havoc. They might be able to compromise people that are in the intelligence sphere because many of them have poor financial acumen. They've dumped over 1 million highly sensitive American records onto the dark web, coming from their data program DeepSeek. This can include names and email addresses and relatives and work histories and other personal details that can be used to either impersonate you or to go and represent themselves as a legitimate company if somebody were to call and try to scam you. We're not talking about password leaks. We're talking about the kind of information that criminals use to hijack your accounts, destroy your finances. I've seen things like fake kidnappings. They call them virtual kidnappings because they have enough information on you to be able to present themselves as legitimate. If you want to use Patriot Protect, you can get their blackout service, which searches the dark web, finds your information that's been leaked, and removes it from the people search sites scammers use to find their victims. Their search and destroy protocol works 24/7. It is the system that Emily and I have, my wife. There's going to be basically the attempt to get 100+ data brokers. There's all these websites. By the way, those are super useful websites if you're an FBI agent working out of your car. They're all open source. They're all free to access. They all want to drive it based on clicks. We did a nice little sit down with one of their co-founders. It's not really an if, it is a when you will get scammed. The question is for how much and what they'll be able to get into. If you guys want to take your name out of that pile and make it harder, check out Patriot Protect. It's really relatively inexpensive. It's cheaper than keeping your porch light on at night. So patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Let's do this. I've got a little clip here. This is coming. I guess Andrew Cuomo has tried to rebrand himself as not being a communist from CNN. This guy is like one of the great rebranding acts. He's now like a meathead bro trying to be sane, but he still has that sensitivity towards the previous. He still wants to blame Donald Trump by default because he spent so much time in that ecosystem where people did just affirm what they said. Again, it's Donald Trump's fault that there's anti-Semitism. It's Donald Trump's fault that he's very, very mean. Even though you could write volumes about what happened to Donald Trump as the scapegoat and the Russia collusion and all the other kind of nonsense, it's really his fault what happened to Hunter Biden and this country. This is a really wild argument. And then he's got Tim Dillon, who's a comedian, who crushes him by bringing up the fact that, no, Bidens were just corrupt. Being corrupt is corrupt. We could just call that out. You don't have to go and play this middle line. Maybe he's just been desensitized and he hangs out with the wrong people too long. I think he overestimates how bright he is. And comedians are, if nothing else, especially ones that know how to do crowd work, they know how to roast you on the spot, and that's exactly what Dillon does here.
Look at what happened with Trump, okay? You can write 3 books on how what happened to him with Russiagate or whatever you want to call it was wrong. What was the first thing he did when he got in power? He went after Biden for being a Ukrainian-Russian plant. The first thing he did was go after Biden and his son, weaponizing a guy's addiction. I don't know how much you know about that world, but unfortunately,
I was an addict for many years. From when I started doing cocaine at 12 and I stopped at 25, and I never ended up in the Ukraine, and I never took a photo of everything I did and put it on a laptop.
But you know
and then
very
dropped
well,
it off at Circuit City.
But you know very well that Hunter Biden is a typical drug-addled person.
I know.
I'm not saying that he didn't do business
drug-addled
deals.
people. Very few of them ended up in the Ukraine, and I mean, their dads are the vice president.
It's not about why he wasn't
in the Ukraine. It's a unique life. Let's say that.
But
it's a unique life.
You would have to look at.
None of my drug addict friends ended up in Malibu selling art for $80,000.
Boom. And yeah, and $80,000. We heard hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of Hunter's art, which wasn't the worst art I've ever seen. It just is the only reason you would buy it is if you were trying to, I don't know, launder money from some foreign government and buy influence. That seems like the most probable answer on why you would go out there and buy it on an otherwise not noteworthy, not collectible, not resellable quote unquote artist / cocaine addict. Nothing funnier than someone saying, I don't know what your background is with addiction. He's like, well, my background is like a decade and a half of being a cocaine addict. Just zoom. And he was like, well, he's just doing typical addict behavior. It's like, except nobody else has the experience of doing that. And by the way, for some reason, the little Circuit City jab in there, it made me quite happy. Again, I want to double back on this. Again, we're talking commies. We're talking Taco Tuesday. We're talking about that lie that continues to try to scapegoat Donald Trump as being the cause. It took me back to a time when Swalwell, who not only eats tacos in profane TikTok videos, he also does leading questions. The sense of irony that most of us have, knowing the story of Fang Fang and knowing the fact that the Chinese used an influence operation and probably like what we would call a honeypot tactic on Swalwell. Now, it was before he was in Congress. Many people don't really know much. They just know, they're like, Fang Fang, you slept with a Chinese spy. They were actually trying to put the Chinese spy into his life before he became as big as he is today. And to his credit, he actually did the right thing, which was like, push this person out. Hold on, before we get there. Sometimes I see stuff in my chat that completely derails me. We have a regular in the chat, Jigsaw Massacre, who said, don't tell me that you worked at Circuit City, Kyle. I absolutely worked at Circuit City when I was in college. And that would have been probably my sophomore or junior year. I 100% worked at Circuit City, and I was one of the last employees there before they shut it down. Okay, you derailed me, but I'm going to get right back on track. Eric Swalwell. You know, most people don't really understand that the Fang Fang thing was the FBI came to him, gave him what they call a defensive briefing. They could have investigated him, by the way, like they did with Trump in the Crossfire Hurricane. That would have been an option. That's not what you normally do to a politician if you're operating in good faith as an FBI that cares about what America is about. If you care about, like, I don't know, our rule of law and staying out of politics. But then we had this guy that kind of didn't do that. So historically, Eric Swalwell got the benefit of the doubt, was given a defensive briefing. You have a Chinese infiltrator in your midst. Would you like to help us? The answer, he said, was yes, to his credit. But that's probably because Jim Comey wasn't the boss back then, or because he was a Democrat, or both. Because given the opportunity to do the same thing to Donald Trump, we found out it was a night and day distinction. That's part of what the Durham report revealed. Hillary Clinton got defensive briefings. Donald Trump got counterintelligence investigations opened into him. This is classic. This is a classic communistic move where the state finds the enemies to whatever it is that the state wants to accomplish and investigates them. And it does so under any pretense it chooses. And that pretense, it turned out, was something that a guy who's currently at the FBI should know a lot about since he did a lot of shows about it. Here's Jim Comey talking about, the quote unquote playbook, AKA the PP tape, as one guy likes to call it.
I want to talk about the Kremlin playbook. And there are a number of ways that a foreign adversary could seek to influence a person. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Financial?
Yes, that can be one.
Romance, you said, is another?
Yes.
Compromise?
Correct.
Setting up a compromise?
Sure, to execute on a compromise, yes.
How about inadvertently capturing a compromise? Meaning they have vast surveillance and you stumble into that surveillance and are caught in a compromise.
Right, and then they take that information, try and use it to coerce you. Yeah, that's part of the playbook.
Like, the irony in that statement right there, because one, the Chinese absolutely do that. I've actually worked cases, some of them are public now, where the Chinese would monitor U.S. citizens coming in that had a family member in U.S. government, and they would monitor that person, do something that was compromising overseas because they have ubiquitous surveillance, and then they would leverage that information. In the case that I'm thinking of, there was a State Department employee. She was a secretary with a top secret clearance, and she had a gay son who went and engaged in gay sex in China while he was infected with HIV, which was a criminal act in China. And then he had a couple of things in front of him. His mom was presented with an opportunity. Give us some information when we ask for it, or we're going to imprison your son forever and come and take him out. He's going to find himself in a Chinese prison and have a very, very bad outcome. And so she gave up U.S. information. She also got money for it, too. So she was classic. She was a classic government employee, single mom. She was in her 50s, black female, high school educated, making a really good salary as a government employee, like the 92% that vote Democrat. Just saying. Jim Comey is actually talking about that thing. And then they did exactly that thing with Donald Trump, did they not? They did ubiquitous surveillance to the point where they investigated him. They didn't give him the courtesy of the Eric Swalwell thing where they said, hey, here's a defensive briefing. They didn't do the courtesy like they did to Hillary Clinton's campaign, defensive briefing. These are very, very common, folks, a defensive briefing. You give them to companies, you give them to business executives, you give them to complete strangers who might find themselves in the wrong space. You give them to military officers, you give them to people that are academics that happen to cross paths with. And you're like, I think this person, because I'm going to default to good faith on Americans, this person likely will side with the United States government's interests. So let's go get them on our side and let them know what's coming in and see if they want to do what we call a double agent operation. Most people don't understand how double agent operations work. It's really straightforward. Let me just lay this out for you guys. You've probably heard the term. Double agent. How do you get a double agent operation to start? What it means is you're playing for both sides. Everyone kind of has that instinct. But what does it really mean? It means that you are in a position of trust or authority within your government. It might mean that you have access to someone who's in that position. The foreign power approaches you and asks you to turn against your nation. And you report it to your nation, the chief security officer. You bring it to the intel agencies. You might bring it to the FBI, what we would call a walk-in. Hey, I was approached and I need to self-report that I had this problem. I have a clearance and I'm required to tell you that this happened. And so then the FBI has a couple things. They could just investigate that person that's going after you, that's targeted you, deport them, PNG, shut them down. Maybe they've got them on enough information from what's already happened that they can shut them down. Or they can play the double agent game. And the double agent game is, we would like you, Donald Trump, Eric Swalwell, take your pick. We would like you to pretend to be agreeable. And whenever they ask you for something, you come to us and we'll give you what it is. We'll give you something that will appease this so we can see what it is that they're targeting. We can find out more about how they work. We can insinuate you into that system. And so you will be reporting on the United States government with the blessing of the United States government. There's an entire system of allowing classified or otherwise classified material to change hands so that we can set that person up. Again, rarely do you find penetrations, rarely do you find terrorists if the United States federal government is not actually involved in actively feeding that person or allowing them to continue. Because when you do, you'd think they'd shut them down. If there was a real terroristic threat, you wouldn't let them just hang out. But if you need to build your case, you might let them do it for longer. And if they're not going to do it and you're really invested in getting that case, maybe you feed them a bunch of stuff. Double agent operations are constantly this give and take where you are trying to passively receive information from the foreign nation, but you're also trying to goad them into asking for more stuff and show them that you're really capable because you want to reveal more over there. So it's a delicate operation. You don't want your person to become not useful to the foreign asset because it takes a lot of time and money to set these up. And in theory, the money goes into what are called white funds. The white funds get in and then they're used by the agency to run the op back against the other country. It's really messy. And if you're involved in this stuff, like, you understand, you have to think kind of multilaterally, which is why when you see these kind of evil, I almost said a swear word, when you see these evil people working, you can't, like, they work in an area of distrust. These are the people that are surrounding Kash Patel and Dan Bongino right now, by the way. People from the counterintelligence world that think like that think it's not 4D chess. It's just regular chess, folks. Regular 2D chess on a board means you are trying to move several moves ahead of your opponent. So when they move into a space, you trap them. Kind of like there's a woman now whose name is Shannon Perry, who's apparently attached at the hip to Dan Bongino as the deputy director. There's a woman there who's been in since 2002. She was last promoted into a non-agent, so she's not a sworn federal agent. She was promoted into what's called an assistant director role in 2024 by none other than Chris Wray, who many of us see was problematic. And like so many others, she's one of Paula Bates' crew, the former deputy director, that's been surrounding and bubble wrapping and keeping track of these guys. So how do you figure out who you can trust in a complete agency that does a ton of intelligence and counterintelligence work, that is constantly lying to their own people, that is lying to people out in the public, that doesn't feel like they need to show their faces? Plenty of examples of that. Tom Fitton's had enough. It makes me kind of happy. You're worried about it. You're worried about, can we deal with people that have basically purged dissent from the ranks, and all the people that are there went along to get along with things that were probably illegal based on all the court rulings we've had so far. We haven't had a definitive, but it's pretty clear that the COVID vaccine mandates were not constitutional. The Fifth Circuit agreed with my lawsuit, my friend's lawsuits. We have ongoing litigation that's going to be able to suss some of this stuff out. The things they did were violations of law. They were willing to do that to protect the agency, not the country, but the institution over the Constitution. And Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch is kind of saying his piece. It's like, how do you trust them? You can't. Are they going to investigate themselves? No. How do you, like, it's not like Bongino and Kash Patel can walk in there and figure out who's who without having to trust some people. And who the hell are they going to trust? Because they didn't work there. They don't know the background. They don't know that Shannon Perry is who she is. She probably seems like a really nice lady. That's why you have to get rid of some parts of it. That's why you have to get deep, deep cuts, or maybe you just get rid of the whole thing, which is what Fitton has kind of arrived at. I kind of love this like radicalized, angry Tom Fitton because he's seeing that the old FBI and the new FBI treat his FOIA request basically the same way.
Is the FBI going to investigate the FBI? Is the FBI going to investigate the DOJ? This is why it won't work. They need to shut down the FBI as far as I'm concerned. It can't be trusted to investigate anything. I trust Dan to personally investigate something, but he's just one man. Kash, he's just one person. He's going to be they'll be relying on a flawed institution. A flawed institution, one that I don't think is fixable.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. It turns out And where's all this coming from? What does this have to do with communists, you think? Well, first of all, the concept of scapegoating. Second of all, the types of people that were allowed to operate with complete impunity in this country that did get the benefit of First Amendment protections, like radical, crazy leftists that were breaking laws. I have this really fun way to wrap up for us. We're going to talk about the 1983 Senate building bombing, which involved none other than Susan Rosenstein. Many of you will know her name. So sorry, Susan Rosenberg, not Rosenstein. That's not a good catch. Susan Rosenberg. And I compared it to January 6th in my head because I couldn't help get past the idea that commies tend to make a lot out of a little and they make a little out of a lot. One of the things that they did was create this false story about Russia and collusion and PP tape hoaxes and so on and so forth. The whole story, they self-rewarded. They gave out Pulitzer Prizes. Greg Gutfeld actually nails this, talking about why the scandal of the quote-unquote big lie and the steal of the election and everything that everybody was really excited about. And some of that data comes back and you're like, oh, it's real. On top of all that, they're having this moment of crisis where there's a tell-all book that Jake Tapper did, basically saying that all of you were idiots for believing us. And they outed themselves to their own audience. And the audience finally realized we don't like being called dummies. Listen to him, the way he sums this up. And of course, the FBI was integral in perpetrating this scheme and this narrative on the American people, along with the media, which they were leaking to.
All right. So here's the problem. This is different. The damage is done. The Democrats always thrived on hoaxes, assuming that by the time the big lie would be exposed, whether it would be Russian collusion or the Fine People hoax, they already got what they needed. The emotional impact of the lie resonated. The truth didn't matter. It's based on that understanding that in working in the press office. The big story always lands on the front page. 2 weeks later, the corrections on page B7. Yeah. That's how it worked. The New York Times and the Washington Post still have their Pulitzers for the alleged Russian interference story, even though we know it's BS. But then something happened, and this is why it's so different. Tapper's book came out, and he deflates this hoax. But it was a hoax that we already knew, but his audience didn't. It was the first time that the correction didn't get buried in the back pages. Biden's infirmity is now more well-known than Biden himself. His name will never be separated from what happened. So the interesting thing, even more interesting than that, if you can imagine, the book didn't sell. That tells you everything. His audience, Jake's audience, was just informed that they were stupid, that they were gullible, that they just got taken. Who wants to buy that book?
Seriously. Who wants to buy the book that tells you that you were dumb, we lied to you, we're claiming we didn't know, but if we were a reputable voice, then why would you listen to us now? So we probably knew, and you got taken in. Everybody else that was on the political right already knew these stories. Now they've basically exposed the magician's trick and said, you dummies, you got taken too. And it became very obvious, I think, that the lies are just, they're self-serving. That the narrative that they're being fed is false constantly. I'll give you a fun example. I just saw this yesterday. This was just leaked out or tweeted out by the FBI. This is Biden FBI, if you want to believe that sort of thing exists. The FBI releases their 2024 active shooter incidents in the United States report. Active shooter incidents decreased by 50% compared to 2023. So in the third year of the Biden presidency, they had 50% more, or they had twice as many. And then in the last year of the Biden presidency, we saw less active shooter incidents. How many incidents were those? You want to talk about the way that communists like to do things? They hide it in statistics. They hide the lie in numbers. They use word games nonstop. They constantly reframe and rephrase. In 2024, the FBI designated 24 shootings as active shooter incidents. Well, what the hell is an active shooter incident, it turns out? That seems really problematic because I need to know what the definition is. These are incidents. I think they actually have a direct name here. An active shooter is one or more individuals actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. But when does it stop? When does it stop being an active shooter? Do you see how that's the dumbest way? It's not like it's ongoing in perpetuity. These are not like people who shot and then got away with it. Almost all of these people are either killed or arrested. We don't have like a lot of unsolved active shooter incidents in the United States. So I don't know what an active shooter incident is. So I started asking some of the AI out there, and that's how I got the headline at the top. How many mass shootings have there been? I asked how many active shootings were there in 2024 in the US. AI gave me back the answer from this BBC story. How many mass shootings are there? Again, play with the words, play with the answer, play with the narrative, confuse your audience. And it turns out the mass shootings, which I assume include all the active shooter events and then some others, which I don't know what it means. And it also includes all the gangland violence, because when you talk about active shooters, I'm almost positive they're talking about like angry white people. Like I'm almost positive of that. It's the people that are acceptable to call shooters. It can't be the people that do shootings every single day. All you got to do is go to heyjackass.com and see what happens in Chicago, which they sort of lampoon as Chicago family values. Mass shootings were on the rise, it turns out, whatever the difference is between those things. Mass shootings, there were more than 488 mass shootings in the United States, not even at the end of 2024. This was in December. And then it gives you this like chart, which is all in the hundreds. But we were talking about things that were in the dozens because they just make it up as they go. How does the U.S. gun death breakdown work? 48,830 people died from gun-related injuries in the U.S. in 2021. That was an 8% increase. Of course, what they forget to tell you is that the bulk of those are still suicides. So we just make it up as we go. They just kind of push things along. But it turned out in 2021, you had a fair number of homicides as well. 20,000. 2021 was a Biden era, I believe. You didn't get that pushed out, that there was a huge number of homicides and a big spike from what we've seen historically. The homicide number historically in the United States, as it was like sitting in its natural place, was like 12,000, 13, 14,000. That was like Trump's legacy. That was kind of where it was. And it was also Obama's. It was like a thing that happened in most of my early adult life. It was always in the teens. And now we punched over 20. You wonder why that was. Maybe it's because you're encouraging crazy people to act crazy and do crazy things, like say that communistic type things, like the land you're standing on is stolen. This is kind of a fun thing. This is from Nick Shirley. He's like a young guy that goes out, does these kind of like auspicious interviews where he stands in contentious places and puts a microphone in people's faces. He also catches some great stuff of crazies. And some of that was what I saw yesterday, which inspired my wife's quip. You never find a happy communist. These people are always effing miserable. So check this guy out. He's got a mask on. He's got glasses. His hair looks like he's a rat that got sprayed down with like some kind of a weed sprayer, and he's got like poison on his head. And then they got this black kid with a shirt open who's going to steal his iPhone because the kid asked to have his stuff stolen. Very funny. Enjoy.
Hey, who is this guy? Come with me. Here we go. Look, now he's running. There he is. He's running away. What's going on? You got a problem with us live streaming or what? Why as well? I don't understand where you're coming from.
Because you got to take accountability for it.
Accountability for what?
Systemic problems. Because this right here, you're occupying indigenous land here. You're occupying space that isn't here.
Wait, so but I can say the exact same thing to you.
You can. And you should.
And you're occupying this space.
And we should. We should be calling out people. Honestly, he and I deserve to be robbed.
Who's we?
Humans.
You say we deserve to be robbed?
Yeah.
Okay, take his iPhone. Take it.
Give me it.
Take it.
I use it for mutual aid. Give me it. You want to help my mutual aid funds?
Give me it.
Do you want to? Okay.
Give me it.
Do you want to
take his iPhone? How are you helping your friend Corey so far if she doesn't have those resources?
Because I give them to her.
Where's my $30?
As well as several other
people. Giving it to her and actually allowing her to have.
You said.
It immediately breaks down the minute when it's like, yeah, these people should be robbed. These people should have their stuff taken. And you go like, oh, dear, well, can we take your stuff? And it's like, well, no, because I'm a good person. I'm one of the good ones. All that stuff ends up in a place like this. It ends up with people, again, scapegoating, blaming folks without even knowing anything about the story because they've predetermined what the answer is. I found this little video. This was a ICE raid taking a guy into custody. And so you've got this angry black guy out there who feels very empowered to say whatever he wants to say. He's screaming at people that he doesn't know. He doesn't know the case. He hasn't read the affidavit for this warrant. He has zero information. And he's encouraging federal agents to put a bullet in their head. Now, we don't have to like what federal agents do. We don't have to like federal agencies. But wishing people to kill themselves when you don't know anything about why they're there or what happened and saying that it's because Donald Trump is an a-hole is a pretty bold move. So again, a little spicy language in this, but you watch this. This is where the brain rot goes. This is why people they're not happy. This is not a happy guy that started saying this stuff. You don't just walk up on the street, see federal agents, and then do this if you're generally a happy person. There's no happy communists.
Like, come on, man. That's the damn shame what y'all doing. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool, but it's a damn shame. Yo, my man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry Trump's an asshole. I'm sorry they voted for this fucking asshole.
It's just cops wandering around. It's all ICE guys. What are we talking about here? Watch this. This is where it gets ugly.
I said it. What? I'm a United States citizen. I said it. All y'all put a bullet in your head. Y'all fucking losers. All y'all fucking losers.
That's not
put
a happy
bullet
person.
in your fucking head. Man,
That's
fuck,
not a
don't
nice,
touch me,
happy
pussy.
dude.
Touch me again. Touch me again. Come on, touch me again.
Just wants a conflict. So badly.
I'm walking to my car. Touch me again.
Yeah, you have a car.
Touch
you live in
again.
America.
Touch me, I swear to God, touch me one more time. Touch me one more time. Touch me one more fucking time, pussy. Touch me one more time, pussy.
He's asking for violence. Why is it that they want to go with violence? Because it's really effective on people that can be bullied. You just don't know what that's going to be. And you find out that a lot of people actually will cave to violence. Here's Jesse Kelly talking about this on his radio show. I don't think he's wrong about this. It's a tool that works because many people shy away from violence.
The communist loves violence because violence is effective, especially on weak people. People like Amy Coney Barrett get eaten alive by violence. They get eaten alive by communists. The left is inherently violent. Here's a couple charts for you. This one is courtesy of Network Contagion. What percentage say that it is at least partially justified to murder Donald Trump? All respondents, only about 38% of them said it was partially justified. That's a little scary. What percentage of the left? 55%, the majority. Oh, that's interesting. What percentage of the left say it's at least partially acceptable to destroy a Tesla dealership? 57%. What percentage of the left say it's at least partially justified to murder Elon Musk? 48.6%. Do I need to pull up the old COVID charts? What percentage of American Democrats thought you should have your children taken from you if you weren't vaccinated, thought that you should be hauled away to a quarantine camp? Communists are violent human beings. They have no morality against it, and unless you realize it, you will succumb to it.
That's a real simple statement, and they're not happy people because of it. It doesn't make them any better off. This happened in Minneapolis. This was a drug raid that involved DEA, ATF, and it sounds like there was also FBI there. They put the wrong tools out there. They keep putting these tactical teams out that have no business doing it. There were all these comments online like, how come these guys don't have OC? OC is your pepper spray. I've never seen an FBI SWAT team train with pepper spray, ever. They don't have pepper balls. They're not a crowd control unit. But here they are trying to do crowd control on a bunch of communists, I'm going to call them, that have decided violence is acceptable, including against federal agents. And I've got a couple of videos of it, so I want to show both of you because I want you guys to see it. It starts off kind of small. It got to the point where they're throwing trash cans on the ground. They're trashing their own place. Is that how you get to heaven on earth? Is that how you create this salvific experience on earth? It's the reason why. They just don't have anything to look forward to. All they have is this. And so they're pissed because guess what? Man will always let you down, even the ones you like. Anyway, here it is.
They're about to take, I guess they brought tankers, people, because they're bringing someone from custody out right now. It's going to probably get crazy. So they're trying to make a line to get someone out. They're bringing somebody out. So it might get crazy.
It's kind of catchy, though, isn't it? That chant, shut the F up. Da, 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 da. Okay, you're seeing them pushing back. These people are going to go stand in front of vehicles, lean against them. All right, and that video, it doesn't show it nearly as well as this next one, which is kind of fun because you're going to see some throws.
Shit, it's going to go down.
Oh, now it's going to go down because they're moving people away from a moving car that's in the middle of the road. So here's another angle. This is from Nick Shirley, I believe. These guys are getting fed up because people are getting in their face. And I'm going to mute some of the background. They're swearing, and you're not missing anything on the background here with the noise. But let me just ask you this. How insane, look at that. That's a man dressed up like a lady. There's a couple of those. That's kind of fun. How insane do you have to be to push into these people that are armed and act like you're going to get away with it and everything's going to be fine? Like you can go and pick a fight with an armed federal agent who's in the middle of doing their job and think it's going to be okay. The only reason why is because we allowed this stuff for years. And we acted like it was not something that was unusual. And I kind of realized it goes back to even my childhood. I just didn't know it at the time. I actually always thought Beavis and Butthead was kind of dumb. But I think Mike Judge, more and more, he was a prophet. This is coming from times when I was probably in high school. And white privilege was being talked about then pretty well, too. So this is one of those great clips. It's a mixture of people who just were out there on the streets screaming about white privilege, just like that guy talking about land back and you should rob us and that we're all wrong. Again, commies. And then like where it goes if you were to actually live it out and you were kind of like, you know, Beavis or Butthead, kind of retarded.
Not be racist to white people because white people are the dominant race in this country. Full stop.
You are calling me privileged when you don't know anything about me. I could have grown up in Section 8 housing.
This is privilege.
Okay, all right. Tell me this.
This is a classic example of white privilege, and you both have it.
What's that?
Anyone want to fill them in?
Yeah, I'll do it. Okay. So white privilege is when white people, particularly men, automatically assume they can take whatever they want. And they never have to worry about getting stopped by the police. And they have the inside track for any job
I got this one, Aisha. They have the inside track for any job they want.
Exactly, Gage. Thank you for that. That's white privilege.
Whoa. And we have that?
You sure do.
I see.
Whoa. I never realized this stuff.
Yeah. You've really opened up my eyes.
Well, I'm glad we've been able to enlighten you. The real question is, do you think you'll be acting differently from now on?
Oh, yeah. I guarantee it.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
Step aside, please. We have white privilege.
Yeah, check it out. Don't worry, it's okay. We automatically assume we can take what we want. We don't have to worry about the police. It's okay, you didn't know. They didn't either. Good stuff.
Watch this.
This is what we were taught, sir.
We're subverting existing paradigms.
This is what we were taught, sir. We didn't know any better, but now that you learned it, imagine if people actually lived the way that you hear these leftists kind of talk, like it actually happened. So I'm going to go all the way back to what I said at the beginning, which is that we're going to talk a little bit about this whole communism slash renaming, changing up the words, and focusing, kind of minimizing things that are a big deal, which is what we saw in 2020. It was a big deal. For the entire year, we saw insanity in this country that was not being diagnosed. And then we saw something that was at least a little bit of a swing back that happened on January 6th of 2021. And of course, that became the biggest deal ever. I found this article here. This is coming from The Guardian. So again, we have to go overseas. It's an 8-month-old article coming from September of 2024. The U.S. right keeps accusing Democrats of being communists, or accusing Democrats of communism. What does that even mean, says this academic-looking white guy with swooshed-over hair. He seems to have white privilege. Conservatives think that giving children free lunch at school is socialism, but vast, powerful private monopolies are, in fact, freedom. No, that's not what we believe. That's called a straw man. That's when you set up an argument that's false. You artificially set it up so that we don't have to actually deal with the real points being made. And this is like, again, you get right into the meat of it and you find out just how ridiculous these people are. They can't make an honest argument about this. You can't honestly argue for a lot of leftist policies, so you set up these straw men. To state the obvious, free lunches, ensuring that poor kids won't go hungry, is not communism. It's the government providing for you, taking from others and providing to you. That's kind of communism. So hard to say otherwise. At one time in recent history, the United States clearly resembled the Soviet Union. So now we're going to go and we're going to make this like sort of false analogy. Empty shelves, long lines outside of shops. Those happened under Trump, to be sure, because of the supply chain problems that happened during COVID-19, which was pushed by and was absolutely capitalized on by communists, right? The same people that went out and destroyed stuff. They used it as an opportunity, and they pushed, instead of doing about class, they did it about race, right? Instead of being about money, they did it about gender and about access to things. It's all struggle. It's all garbage. To me, that's pretty incredible to see people making such a disingenuous and dishonest argument. So the answer should always be less government, and it should always be more faith in not man and not from this world. I'm going to give you my last little example. I don't actually have it on the screen. I didn't make slides of it, but let me just read something. In 1983, the United States Senate building was bombed in what is called a terrorist attack, accurately. It happened on November 7th of 1983. I was a very small child right then. It was a quote-unquote protest against military involvement in Lebanon and Grenada, so like not the United States. The attack led to heightened security in the D.C. metropolitan area, inaccessibility of certain parts of the Senate building. 6 members of the Maoist Armed Resistance Unit, also known as Resistance Conspiracy, a communist organization, were charged, and they were not arrested for almost 5 years. They were picked up in May of 1988. They were charged with the bombing and related bombings that happened at Fort McNair and the Washington Navy Yard, also in Washington, D.C., which occurred on April 25th of 1983 and April 20th of 1984, respectively. In other words, they did this from April of 1983 till April of 1984. They had a full year with 3 successful bombings of federal properties, and they represented a communist movement, and several of them were in fact captured. This is what the Senate building looked like, so you're aware, after the bombing. That looks far worse than anything I saw on January 6th. They did millions of dollars worth of damage, which would equate probably close to $500 million from what we can estimate in today's money, 1983 to 2025. That also shows you how far things have gone. What's crazy is one of the people that was involved in that bombing was a woman named Susan Rosenberg. And the reason why I found it so interesting, because my mind immediately leapt to the most dangerous thing that ever happened in the U.S. Capitol, which obviously was not January 6th, even if those people acted like it was. So I just wanted to see, how did Wikipedia cover that 1983 Maoist uprising, also known as the communist, they were called M19CO was the other group of it, quote unquote, far left terrorists. So she's not part of us. She's not obviously representing our ideology, even though she fits right into the ideology of today. Susan Lila Rosenberg, listen to how she is described by people on the left who run sites like Wikipedia, where a lot of leftists get their history. Susan Lisa Rosenberg is an American activist, writer, advocate for social justice and prisoners' rights. And also, incidentally, during the late 1970s and in the mid-1980s, she was active in a far-left terrorist cell called May 19th Communist Organization, also known as M19CO, which, according to contemporaneous FBI reports, which we're going to have to obviously discount because it was the 70s FBI before we took it over, quote, openly advocated for the overthrow of the U.S. government through armed struggle and use of violence. Again, not nice, not happy people, violent communists. They provided material support to an offshoot of the Black Liberation Army that also included armored truck robberies, engaged in bombings of government buildings, including the 1983 Capitol bombing. She lived as a fugitive for 3 years. She was eventually captured with a large cache of explosives, firearms, including automatic weapons. You know, just like the J6ers. I just cannot help but see the parallel there. She was then pardoned later on and found herself back in the good graces of the Democrat Party. I want you to just do a little contrast with people that have been on this program, to include Joe Biggs and Enrique Tarrio. If you're watching this program, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're watching it over on Spotify and you have that ability, or if you're watching on Rumble, if you're watching on X, you can see the big difference in these two people's posts and the way that they're listed. Photographs. When you are someone on the right, they post your mugshot. They post something to make you look bad so you can see that face and know that that is what a terrorist really looks like. That person is a criminal. Susan Rosenberg has been excused from having to have a photograph on her Wikipedia site. I found that to be very interesting. You guys are asking in the chat who pardoned her. Of course, it was Bill Clinton on the last day of his presidency. Joseph Biggs, also known as Joseph Randall Biggs. He's an American veteran, media personality, organizer of the Proud Boys, and convicted felon who participated in the January 6th U.S. Capitol attack, I find that the things that he did in his life are probably far less interesting than the one day when he decided to go walk around with what he described as two hot Italian girls through the U.S. Capitol, resulting in no violence on his behalf, compared to the lady who participated in a bombing and was caught with weapons and explosives, including machine guns, in her hands. Doesn't that seem crazy to you? Enrique Tarrio is the other one, also on the screen, also shown with a picture, wearing a plate carrier, because that's probably how he always dresses, right? Enrique / Henry Tarrio, born in 1983 or 1984, is an American convicted seditionist and far-right activist. He was the chairman of the Proud Boys, a neo-fascist organization that promotes and engages in political violence in the United States. He was convicted of seditious conspiracy for his role in the United States Capitol attack. But he was pardoned by Donald Trump. By the way, they bury the pardon of Susan Rosenberg all the way down after her imprisonment. They have a whole thing about her activism and her imprisonment because, of course, she went to jail for the struggle. Her sentence was commuted by Bill Clinton on January 20th, 2001, his last day in office after she served more than 16 years. Her commutation produced a wave of criticism by police officers and New York elected officials and like anybody else that cares about justice, because these people don't. And again, that leads us to the fact that our judiciary is such a problem. They actually look at this as a moral struggle. They love it. It's all about that. And that's why your communists are really unhappy. And here's the other thing that I just noticed, because I'm going to play you a little clip from Senator Kennedy out of Louisiana. I wasn't sure if we had any room for this, but we're going to play it in here. It's quite interesting to me that if you were to ask me if someone is evil and I were to answer yes, or if I would refer to somebody on this podcast as evil, and then you ask me under oath if I believe that person is evil, the answer would still be yes, whether I said it here or whether I said it in front of a Senate confirmation hearing or anywhere else. It's very interesting that this woman who is, she's the host of the Strictly Scrutiny podcast, it sounds like, or maybe she was just a guest on this one. She's a law professor. And she referred to some of the Supreme Court justices that she disagrees with as evil, and then she wouldn't own that statement, even though I know she feels that way, because that's how you say things when you casually drop it in conversation. It's just one more idea that we don't have people that are working from the same good faith position. There are people in this government, there are people that are training people in this government that refuse to operate under the good faith principles that, even if I don't agree with someone, it probably comes from a place where they don't think they're the bad guy. They're the bad guys. I'll say it. And what this lady is doing, this disingenuous, this lie, this obvious lie, it actually is evil. That's evil. That's what it looks like. It looks like unhappy, very despondent communists.
On April 22nd, 2024, you said there are some members of the Supreme Court that are evil.
Will she be able to control its potential future distortion by her evil colleagues? Probably not.
Which justices were you talking about?
I'll take it your word, Senator. I don't recall using that word, but...
All right, here's what you said. You were talking about the majority opinion in Muldrow v. City of St. Louis. You said, quote, Justice Kagan, will she be able to control the opinion's future distortion by her evil colleagues? Probably not, end quote. Who were you talking about?
Sir, I'm very skeptical. If there's a transcription, it was probably a transcription error. I do not think I said.
No, you said it.
By her evil colleagues.
Why don't you own up to it? Which you call some of the members of the Supreme Court evil. Now, which ones do you think are evil?
I would have to refresh my recollection. I've been very critical of some members of the Supreme Court.
You made that statement, aren't you?
I'm
you're an officer
Senator, it doesn't
of the
sound
court.
like something that
you know
I
what
would
I'm
say.
Embarrassed at that you're teaching our kids.
I don't refer to Supreme Court justices as evil.
By her evil colleagues.
In the classroom,
on
sir.
Your podcast, April 22nd, 2024.
Okay, well,
big as Dallas. And you're an officer of the court, and you're here advising us to be respectful to federal judges, and you say they're evil members of the United States Supreme Court? Gag me with a spoon.
Why do people still say gag me with a spoon? You can't agree to the thing that makes you look bad, because then everybody realizes that you're out there and you have this opinion. If you actually respect and you have that opinion and you believe that people are operating in evil, you can very clearly talk about it. Go watch any of the people on the political right. They would say the same thing. I think this is a spiritual war. I think people that are engaging on the other side are evil, and I'm willing to say it out loud. It's caused some heat in our family. Not between my wife and I, but because our extended family is concerned. There are things that are evil. But if you're going to just play mealy-mouth games with what is and what is not evil, bad outcomes resulting in the paradise on earth that you aspire to, then you're gonna dance around it because you can't own those statements because you know how it looks. And those people in the Supreme Court that disagree with you, they're probably not evil, some of them. Or they are, and you just own it, and you say that. I want to end today with something that we don't always do, but my friend Joe Altman is going to be in court today. You guys have seen him on this program before, and I want to just have you guys put him in your prayers for the day. He's going to go and do something that's difficult. He's going to be asked for information that he is not going to provide to a federal court. He's going to protect a source as like a journalist, as a reporter, as somebody who is out doing something that he's allowed to do. And journalists for a long time have protected sources and methods, not like the United States intelligence community. They don't have that ability and that shield. So sometimes they have to go to jail for contempt. And he told me last night that he's going to be going to jail for contempt if he is asked, and he refuses to give up the names to a judge in a hearing today in Denver. So put your prayers out there for Joe. Think about him today and his family, his wife. And I asked him last night, and this is the difference between communists and not communists. It's real. He's not angry. He wasn't angry. I said, you sound like you're at peace with this decision. And he said, yeah. And I said, it's funny. If you know that we're not supposed to win here on earth, then you don't get mad when you lose as much. You just don't, because that's the difference. Communists are not happy people because they're not going to win, but they kind of expect to win. They're looking for some sort of like just world that doesn't exist. And people that are Christian, that have faith in more than just what men do and what men live on, they look around and they say, yeah, the world's full of injustice. It's always been full of injustice. The most perfect man that ever walked this earth was killed by people who knew him, and his best friends denied him because they were scared to save their own skin. And it was still okay. And he won. He won by losing. So how much are we going to be mad about losing when we're not even near that? And so Joe seemed to have a lot of peace in his life when I talked to him last night. So anyway, pray for him that he continues to have that strength and discernment, and pray that the judge doesn't send him. Because wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a just world where a judge saw someone doing something honorable and saw that, yeah, we do have freedom of the press, and we do not give up sources for people. We do actually allow our journalists to report on malfeasance within our government, because we can't trust that our law enforcement agencies or that our government just by itself will do the right thing. It hasn't done the right thing. It has scapegoated and gone after people the way the communist regimes did. So we don't have a monopoly on just actions within our federal government or our state government or our local governments. They don't all operate well. And it'd be nice if a judge actually acted like a judge and had some discernment. And we'll see. I hope that she does. I pray that she does. And if not, my friend will still be okay. So pray for his strength and for his fortitude as he goes through this kind of ordeal. And that is my ask of you guys. I'm also going to ask you to go ahead and like the video. If you're watching here, I'd ask you to put a 5-star review. If you're watching over on Spotify, if you're listening on Apple, give us one of those as well. I haven't been punching those nearly as much, but it'd be awesome if you guys did. Again, you can find us at rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. It's youtube.com/Kyle Seraphin, where we keep growing. And I'm very appreciative for you guys doing that thing over there. Just another way that we have an outlet in case things get screwy on one end. Locals, you can find us in the community over there where we put all the articles up. It's KyleSeraphin.com. And lastly, if you want to share the show with a friend, just send them a link. Just send them the text and say, hey, check this out, KyleSeraphinShow.com. It's not spam. It will take you right to Spotify. You don't even need to download the app, but it is a free app if you guys want to go do that. Make sure you've liked, subscribed, shared with the friends where you're at. That is my ask of you, in addition to praying for my buddy. Thanks for letting us go long today. Go out there and don't be a communist today, Go out there and be someone who's happy, because you're not going to get heaven on earth. But if you don't expect it, you won't be one of those miserable turds that throws trash cans at federal agents. All right, God bless you. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, where it won't be Taco Tuesday, Wednesday. It will be Thursday, and I'm sure more nonsense will be happening in this country. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.